All right, so I'm going to go through the process of this is actually a handle that came out of my mill, and we're going to be making new knobs to go on it. This is not a thread that we can really work with. It's a metric, and it's kind of an oddball thread. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this down to a 3/8 inch diameter rod, and then we're going to rethread it. So we'll be rethreading it with the standard threads. So in this video, I'm going to show you, first I'm going to go ahead and turn this down, and then I'm going to do another couple videos to show how to set the lathe up to thread, and then how to actually go through the process. All right, so the first thing that we've got to do is we've got to set this, just as an example, if we were to turn this thing, I need to loosen up my screws just a little bit more. If we were to turn this piece here to 90 degrees, what we want is we want the angle of this to be 30 degrees off of that. And so looking down here on the lathe, and we've made a mark here, you can see the little mark there. What we're going to do is we're going to set this on 29, because we actually want 29 degrees, which is actually 31 because of the direction that we're going. So we're lining our line up here with 31 degrees, and that gives us 29 degrees off of 90. So we're basically moving this 29 degrees in this direction. And then once we do that, we're going to lock our table down here. So we're just going to tighten these guys up. We're going to verify here that we're still on 31 degrees. And we are. We're just going to tighten these up a little bit. And then we'll go over here to this side. Tighten this one. All right, so we have now set it on 29 degrees. So we have set this table, or this piece here, our slide, on 29 degrees. The next thing that we've got to do is we've got to actually get this parallel with our thing that we're going to be cutting the threads in. And then we also need to replace our tool here. And we're just going to grab our threading tool. All right, so we've got our threading tool, and it's already centered, so we're going to go ahead and lock this down. All right, so if you don't have the tool to actually get this thing in the right position, because we want it straight ahead, you can actually use the tool post itself and move the lathe over here and line it up with the flat side of our chuck, and get it pretty close enough to work. So this gets this in the right position. So we've got the tool at 90, or at 30 degrees or 29 degrees. We've got this parallel with our chuck, or parallel with the thing that we're going to be cutting the threads in. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to come over here to the lathe, and we've got a table here that we want to actually figure out what thread. So we're in the inch thread, so that's what we're looking at here. And so we're cutting the 3/8 inch by 16. And so what we're going to do is, this tells us that we want the handle, the one knob, in position 2, and then we want A2 in the other position. So what we do on the lathe is we come down here. This is our A, so we turn this all the way to the left for our A. We put this position in position 2, and then we put this position in 2. So we got A2, number 2, and then up here what we're going to do is, this thing in the S position, it doesn't make, these S and M don't mean anything. In the S position, we're actually scrolling or moving the tool, the saddle, back and forth based on this bottom bar. if we move it over to the M position, then it's going to be the thread rod up here that's going to be driving it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to bump this and get us over into the M position. So we just hit that and get us into the position that we want. We also want to slow this thing down, so we're going to move this over into the low position. So we're turning at 70 revolutions on that side. We're going to have the saddle moving this direction, so that takes care of that. So the control panel is now all set, and that's really all that you have to do. You set the knobs down here for whatever thread you want per inch, and then you're good on this side, and then your revolutions. So now we've got our tools set up and we've got everything like we want it. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to move our tool back over here to where it's barely touching the material. So we're just going to slide this thing over here and we're going to move it in until we're just barely touching the material. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back over here to these knobs, and we're going to, I'm going to try to do this with one hand, but we're going to hold this thing and we're going to move this around until we get on 0. So we're setting this knob on 0, and then what we're going to do is up here we're going to also set this knob. So we're going to, this one's a little bit stiffer. So we're going to turn this one around and get it on 0. And so we want to make sure that we're on 0 here. So we're barely touching the material. We've got this set on 0 here, and keep in mind this is the tool this is the one we're going to be going in on while we're making the threads. This one, for right now, we're going to just be using to back off, and then we're going to go back to 0. So we keep going back to 0 here, and you'll see how this works in a second. And then this is the one we're actually controlling the thread depth with at this point. Now, this tool here, we've got numbers on here, and for the even threads that we're cutting, we can start on any one of these number slots here. Now I had to make another little line here on my lathe because the dot that they have on here isn't actually where this thing engages. But here's basically the concept. So this knob here is going to engage and disengage this bar here, the threading rod. When I engage this, this thing is going to start spinning when I turn this thing on. In fact, let me back up a little bit here, and then we'll go ahead and turn this thing on. So we've got the lathe turning, and you'll notice down here that this rod is turning and this guy is turning. The only thing that I need to make sure of is that I push this knob down when I'm on one of these numbers here. So for example, if I engage the thing, and I was a little bit late there, and you can practice with this, but so if I wanted to engage this, and I'll switch hands here. So right there is a whole number to engage, and then I want to hold my hand here because I'm going to be disengaging this in a second. And I did this a little far away, but you'll see here in a second, it's going to start cutting, and actually it's not going to cut anything in this particular pass because we didn't change anything, but you'll see it'll make a light little groove across here. And then when we get over here to the end, we're going to stop it. And then what we're going to do, so I've pulled this handle back up to stop everything. This handle here though, I'm going to move it back and forth just a little bit to give myself a bit of a groove here, because I need a little bit of room to be able to stop threading when I'm done. Now, I can't back this thing up to start my next run, because if I do, the tool is going to actually cut into my threads. So what we're going to do, and that's where we said this is going to keep going back to 0 for the time being, what we're going to do is we're going to back off on this, And what we've done is we've backed the tool away from the material, and now we're going to use this to back us up. So we're basically backing up off of the material. And now what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to this dial, and I'm going to turn it in, and it's really up to you how much you do this, but I'm just going to turn it into 5 thousandths here just to make another run. And so the other thing is I got to go back to 0 on this. So we're going to turn this dial back around here until we get back on 0. And so I have reset this to be back in its original position, and this is the only thing that's controlling my depth right now, because I have to keep pushing this thing in at 29 degrees. All right, so we're going to make another run, and so what I'm going to do again is I'm going to wait until I get on a whole number here, and then I'm going to engage that. And so then we're going to come up here, and I'm going to keep my hand on that knob, because I've got to disengage it when we get over here to where we're going to stop. And then we're going to take our big knob and we're going to move it just a little bit back and forth to give me a little bit of a groove. So it's just going in and making a little bit of a groove there for me to work with. Now I'm going to come back here to this big knob. We're going to back it off a little bit so that we don't mess up our threads. We're going to use this knob to back off of our material, get a little bit of a distance away. And now what we're going to do is we're going to come back to this knob and we're going to go another 5 thousandths. So now we're going to make another run. The problem is that if you think about this, we want to make sure that every time we engage this, that we're getting engaged in the same position. Otherwise we'll be cutting threads in the wrong place. And so what this thing is doing here is it's giving me that position. So as long as I start it again at that same spot on a whole number, this thing's going to start cutting threads in the same position. Well, I'm sitting here talking and I forgot one key element. So remember, you've got to go back to 0 on this dial, because if you don't, then you're too far away and you're not going to cut anything. So now, if we go back down here, find us our thing, engage it, and now we should be cutting this thing at the right place. And you'll notice that when it goes into the threads, we're making the same line, it's just a little bit deeper. And then we just disengage it, make our slot. And then we're going to back off. So again, we're going to come off of this guy so that we've got room and don't mess our threads up. We're going to use the big guy to come back. We're going to use this guy to go back to 0. And then we're going to take this guy and we're going to move it on over here to 2. So we're going to jump it a little bit more. So we're going to make a little bit deeper cut this time. And then we're going to engage that. Keep our hand on it, because we've got to make sure to disengage it when we get over here. Make our little groove. And then we're going to back this off. Move off of our threads. Put this back on 0. And you basically just repeat this until you get the threads where you want them. And so now we're going to watch this guy. And then we're just going to come up here and do it again. And so what we're really looking for here is we want to keep doing this until the threads, the tops of the threads are pretty pointed. And that's really our gauge to know when we're about done. All right, so again, we're just going to back this thing off. We're going to turn it down here. We're going to go back to 0. We're going to go into 4 this time. We're going to come come down here and get our number. And then we're just going to go up here and we're just going to keep cutting this. Now I'm going to stop the video and I'll come back when I'm actually got the threads. Now you'll notice I've gone down to about 5 thousandths. And if we come up here and look at the threads, and I don't know if how good you're going to be able to see this on the video here. Evidently not very good. I'm trying to get it to focus on the threads, but what you're looking for is we want the threads to be pointed. So we basically are going to cut until we get the edges, the top part of the threads pretty thin. And then once we do that, we're going to change up on what we're doing. So right now we have set this to go in 5 thousandths and we're sitting at that position. We've come back over here on this dial back to 0. So if we were, and in fact, I'm 1 revolution off here, so I got to turn this back around to 0 on this side. And you got to kind of pay attention to where you're at. So now what we're going to do is we've finished cutting the threads, and you'll notice if I were to run this thing through again where it's located, it's just going to go through and cut through those threads one more time at the same position that I was a moment ago. But what we want to do now is we want to actually cut a groove straight into the threads to give it a little bit of a groove at the bottom. So we know we've got the height of the thread where we want it, or at least the thread cut. Now what we want to do is we want to go straight in and put a little bit more depth on it. And that just helps the nut go. So we no longer want to use this dial to make any of our adjustments. Now we want to go down to the one that we've been zeroing out every time, and what we're going to do is we're just going to go over 1/1000th of an inch here, or 1/1000th. And so we're just putting, usually we end up at about 2.5 on this dial before it gets to where the nut goes on really well. But we're going to start off here, and so what we're doing, everything else is going to be the same. We're going to turn the lathe on. We're going to engage this the same way that we've been doing. The difference is though is instead of cutting the thread height, we're actually going to be cutting a little bit of a chamfer down. Oh, I just messed up the threads. Sitting here messing around with holding the phone, and I think I put a little bit of a notch in my beginning thread, but we can fix it. So what we're going to do, everything again is exactly the same as it was the first time. We're just cutting a little groove down on the bottom part of the thread now. So we're going to, now this, we were coming back to 0, so we're going to have to kind of pay attention to what we're doing here. So we're going to back this off so that we can move the lathe. We're going to back it up, and then we're going to go back to 0. And when we get to 0, we were on 1, and so we're going to move it over to 2. We're right around 2 now, and it's probably going to be enough to do what we're trying to do here. We're going to come back over here, engage that, and then we're just going to make one more run at it, and then we're going to try to put a nut on it and see what it does. So we're going to go ahead and back this up, get it off the threads, and then I'm also going to turn this on for just a moment. I'm going to touch it with a file here, and we also want to put a little bit of a chamfer on end of the rod there to kind of help us start the nut. Now we're going to take our nut and we're going to see if it will screw on there. And there you go. So that's pretty much all there is to cutting threads on the lathe. It's just you gotta start off up here, get it at the right angle, and then step in to however deep you think you need to go on that. Just eyeballing it. And then once you get that cut and you get everything like you want it, then you go back to this guy and step it in one or two to get a little bit of depth on the back side or the bottom of the thread to help the nut get started. And then you're pretty much done. That's all there is to it.